The rain was coming down hard that night. Sabrina was driving carefully, but exhaustion was starting to blur her focus. She had left the library later than usual. Her mum had already texted twice, asking if everything was okay. She glanced at her phone, just for a second. It was enough. A shadow crossed the headlights. The impact was sharp, not violent, but final. The world went silent. Sabrina felt the blood drain from her face. She jumped out of the car, her legs shaking. An elderly man was lying on the asphalt, his cane thrown several feet away. "Sir, can you hear me?" He opened his eyes slowly, confused but conscious. I think so," he murmured. Her hands trembled as she called 911. She dropped to her knees beside him in the pouring rain, holding his hand. "I didn't see you. I'm so sorry." He winced slightly but tried to smile. "I should have looked more carefully before crossing." Inside the ambulance, when the paramedic asked if she was family, Sabrina didn't hesitate. "No, but I'm going with him." And she did. The tests showed something close to a miracle. No major fractures, just bruises and a minor shoulder displacement. He was discharged the next morning, but Sabrina never left during the night. She sat beside his hospital bed, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing against her chest. When he woke up more alert, he looked at her. "You stayed. It was my fault." He studied her for a few seconds. "A lot of people would have left." She looked down. "I wouldn't have been able to sleep." He slowly extended his hand. "My name is Henry." She hesitated, then took it. "Sabrina." A faint smile appeared on his face. "Well, Sabrina, I guess this isn't the worst way to make a new friend." She let out a nervous laugh despite herself, and in that quiet hospital room, something unexpected began. In the days that followed, Sabrina insisted on driving him to his follow-up appointments. Henry lived alone, a modest house, neat, well-kept, no sign of wealth, no sign of excess, just care. They started talking about books, old music, regrets, second chances. Henry had a gentle sense of humor, observant, kind. He asked about her dreams. She avoided talking too much about her struggles, but he noticed. He always noticed. About a week later, he said it casually, almost as if it were an afterthought. "I'd like you to meet my grandson." Sabrina nearly refused. "That's not necessary. He needs to meet someone who didn't run when things got difficult." She fell silent. The following Saturday she went, and that's when the second story began, because when the door opened, the man standing there was not what she expected. Sabrina almost turned around 3 times before ringing the doorbell. Henry's house looked simple from the outside. An old 2-story home, light paint slightly faded by time. A small garden in the front, carefully maintained. Nothing about it suggested wealth. Nothing suggested excess. Only care. She held a small paper bag with cookies she had baked the night before. It wasn't much, but it was what she could offer. She took a breath, rang the bell. The door opened a few seconds later. It wasn't Henry. It was him. Tall, straight posture, serious expression. His dress shirt sleeves rolled up like a man who either worked too much or didn't know how to relax. His eyes moved over her, slowly, not arrogantly, carefully. "You must be Sabrina." His voice was controlled. "Yes. Mr. Henry invited me." "I know." A short silence. "Come in." She stepped inside. The house felt quieter than the last time she had been there. Henry appeared from the living room with a wide smile. "Sabrina, you came." He opened his arms, and she hugged him gently, still afraid of hurting his shoulder. "Wouldn't miss your special lunch." Henry turned toward his grandson. "Daniel, this is the young woman who ran me over." Sabrina's eyes widened. Henry? Daniel didn't smile. I know, he told me. But his look said something else. He was evaluating her. Henry walked toward the kitchen. You two can talk while I finish up in here. The silence that followed was uncomfortable. Sabrina held up the paper bag slightly. I brought cookies. You didn't have to. I know. He crossed his arms. My grandfather doesn't usually trust people that quickly. She felt the weight of that. I'm not asking for trust. Then why are you here? She hesitated. Was it guilt, responsibility, or the strange truth that somehow that elderly man had filled a space in her life she didn't know had been empty? Because he was alone in the hospital, she said finally. Daniel studied her face more carefully. There was sincerity there, but he wasn't ready to believe it. During lunch, Henry made a point of telling old stories. He laughed loudly, teased Sabrina about her sharp opinions on literature, mentioned how she disagreed with him about happy endings. Daniel listened more than he spoke. When Henry stood up to get dessert, Daniel broke the silence. My grandmother passed away 5 years ago. Sabrina lowered her eyes. I'm sorry. After that, a lot of people got closer. The sentence lingered. Not out of kindness. She understood immediately. He was protecting the only family he had left. I'm not after anything, she said calmly. That's what everyone says. The response came too fast, too defensive. There was something there, something broken. After lunch, Henry insisted Sabrina stay for coffee. Daniel stepped outside to take a call. Sabrina helped wash the dishes. Is he always like that? She asked quietly. Henry sighed. Daniel learned early that trust can be expensive. What happened? Henry hesitated. His mother got involved with the wrong people when he was a teenager, lost a lot of money, almost lost the house. He had to grow up faster than he should have. Sabrina felt the weight of it. Daniel wasn't cold. He was tired. When she left, Daniel walked her to the gate. You don't have to come every day, he said, looking out at the street instead of at her. I know. My grandfather builds expectations quickly. I haven't promised anything I can't keep. He finally looked at her. And what can you keep? She took a breath. Presence. That answer disarmed him. Just for a second. We'll see, he said, opening the gate. But for the first time, his tone wasn't defensive. It was curious. Sabrina kept visiting Henry. Sometimes she brought books. Sometimes she just listened. Daniel was present most of the time, still distant, still watchful, but he began asking small questions. Where do you work? Public library. You're in school? Literature. Planning to teach? Maybe research. He nodded thoughtfully. You speak like someone who thinks before answering. She smiled slightly. And you speak like someone who already decided not to trust anyone. He didn't respond, but he didn't deny it either. Died at the seeds one afternoon. Henry had to go in for a shoulder checkup. Daniel was stuck in an online meeting. Sabrina offered to drive him. Daniel hesitated. I can reschedule. Henry cut him off. No need. Sabrina drives better than I cross streets. Sabrina laughed. Daniel didn't, but he allowed it. On the way back, Henry said quietly, he's afraid of losing what's left. I'm not a threat. He doesn't know that yet. When they returned, Daniel was standing at the door, watching. He didn't look angry. He looked worried. Everything okay? He asked. Everything, Henry answered. Daniel looked at Sabrina. Thank you. It was the first genuinely kind word he had directed at her. Weeks passed. Sabrina and Henry's friendship deepened. They had inside jokes, long conversations about choices and regrets, arguments about books that ended in laughter. Daniel watched it all, until one night Henry felt slightly dizzy. Nothing serious, but enough to scare them. Sabrina was there. Daniel was too. While Daniel spoke with the doctor on the phone, Sabrina held Henry's hand. "I'm fine," Henry insisted, but the fear in his eyes was real. Daniel hung up, took a deep breath, looked at Sabrina. "Stay." It wasn't a request. It was a need. She stayed. And later that night, sitting in the quiet living room after Henry had fallen asleep, Daniel finally broke. "I don't know how you do it." "Do what?" "Care, without expecting something back." She thought before answering. "I've been alone enough to recognize when someone else is." Silence. He looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. Not the girl who hit his grandfather with her car, but the woman who stayed. Jadis Derns, there was no confession, no dramatic gesture, just closeness. Glances that lingered a half-second longer, conversations that stretched past what was necessary, an accidental touch that neither forgot. But Daniel still carried weight. "I'm not good at this," he admitted one night. "At what?" "Trust. I'm not asking you to trust me, just get to know me." He exhaled slowly. Maybe it was the first time someone hadn't demanded something from him. One seemingly ordinary afternoon, while Henry napped in his chair, Daniel received a phone call. His expression changed instantly, tension. He ended the call slowly. Sabrina noticed. Something happened. He hesitated. "I need to deal with something from my family's past." "Serious?" He looked at his grandfather sleeping, then at her. It could be. And for the first time there was fear in his eyes. Not fear of losing money, but of losing stability, and maybe of losing what he was just beginning to feel. The phone call changed the atmosphere in the house. Until then, everything had been light, conversations about books, quiet laughter, subtle teasing between Sabrina and Daniel. But that late afternoon, the silence felt heavier than usual. Henry was asleep in his armchair, his head slightly tilted to one side. His breathing was steady, but there was a tiredness in his face Sabrina hadn't noticed before. Daniel stood near the window, still. "What is it?" she asked again, more firmly this time. It took him a few seconds to answer. "My grandfather's past isn't as simple as he makes it seem." A chill ran through her. "You've said that before." "I never explained." He ran a hand through his hair, the gesture he used whenever pressure closed in around him. He owned an investment company. It grew too fast, expanded too fast, trusted too much. Sabrina kept her eyes on him. "And someone betrayed him." Daniel nodded. "A partner, a man named Robert Hayes." The name lingered in the air. He manipulated contracts, diverted small amounts at a time. Nothing big enough to raise immediate suspicion. And Henry didn't notice? He did. Too late. Daniel turned fully toward her now. "When my grandfather found out, he had two choices: expose everything publicly and trigger immediate bankruptcy, or sell the company, absorb indirect responsibility, and quietly pay off the debts." Sabrina frowned. "He chose to protect the employees." "Yes. And the other man disappeared." She let the information settle. "And now he's back." "Yes." Silence. Henry shifted slightly in his chair. Instinctively, they lowered their voices. "What does he want?" Sabrina asked. Daniel hesitated. "He claims my grandfather should have protected him too." "That doesn't make sense." "To someone who lost everything afterward, it does." That's when she noticed something important. Daniel wasn't speaking with anger. He was speaking with fear. Yet that night, Sabrina couldn't sleep. She drove home slower than usual. The words past and threat echoed in her mind. She kept thinking about the accident. If it hadn't happened, she would have never met Henry. And what if her presence had stirred something that was meant to stay buried? The next morning, Henry called her. "You didn't come by today. I thought you might need rest. I need company, not silence." She smiled despite the tension in her chest. "I'm on my way." And when she arrived, Henry was sitting at the kitchen table. No book, no easy smile. He looked older. "Did Daniel tell you?" he asked directly. "Yes." Henry took a deep breath. "I wanted you to know me without that weight. You did what you believed was right. Not everyone agrees. You lost money protecting people." He looked at her carefully. "I lost more than money." "What did you lose?" "Reputation, friends, trust." She heard the pain in his voice. "Do you regret it?" He thought for a few seconds. "No." The answer came steady. "Then there's nothing to hide from." A faint smile appeared on his face. "You speak like someone who still believes the world rewards the right choices. I need to believe that." He reached across the table and took her hand. "Don't lose that." 2 days later, Sabrina left the library later than usual. The sky was already darkening. She was walking absent-mindedly when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned. The same man in the suit. Cold eyes. "We've spoken before, I remember. Your involvement is complicating things." "I'm not involved in anything." He stepped closer. "You're more involved than you realize." Her heart began to race. "What do you want?" "Convince Henry to make a deal." "What kind of deal?" "One that avoids bigger problems." "Is that a threat?" He smiled faintly. "It's a warning." Then he walked away. Sabrina stood there feeling the weight of it. This wasn't just an old story resurfacing. It was real pressure. When she told Daniel what happened, he lost his composure. "I told you this would happen." "I didn't provoke anything." "He wouldn't have approached you if he didn't know you mattered to my grandfather." The word hit her, mattered. "Should I step back then?" He exhaled sharply. "I don't want you getting hurt. I don't want him facing this alone." Daniel stared at her. "Do you always do this?" "Do what?" "Take responsibility for things that aren't yours." She hesitated. "Maybe." Silence. He stepped closer. "I don't want you in this war. I'm already in it." It wasn't defiance. It was truth. That night, Henry called both of them into the living room. The air was serious. "Robert doesn't just want money." Daniel stiffened. "What does he want?" Henry inhaled slowly. "He wants public acknowledgement that he wasn't the only one responsible." "That's a lie," Daniel said immediately. "Not entirely." Sabrina frowned. Henry continued. "I knew there were irregularities before I acted. I delayed confronting him because I hoped he would stop." Silence filled the room. "So you blame yourself?" Daniel asked. "Yes." Daniel closed his eyes briefly. "He's using that against you. He's using an incomplete truth." That's when Sabrina understood something deeper. Henry wasn't afraid of losing money. He was afraid his grandson would see flaws he'd never known about. Henry stood slowly, walked to a cabinet, took out a folder, placed it on the table. "I haven't told you everything," Daniel frowned. "What else is there?" Henry looked at Sabrina first. "I changed my will after the accident." Her heart skipped. "Mr. Henry, I don't have many years left. And I need to make sure what I built has purpose." Daniel looked confused. "What does that mean?" Henry took a steady breath. "It means my decision isn't only about money." Sabrina felt the air thin in her lungs. "What is it about?" Henry rested his hand on the folder. It's about who deserves to continue what I started. The silence was absolute. Daniel looked at Sabrina. She knew instinctively that whatever was inside that folder would change everything. But she didn't yet know how. Henry closed the folder without revealing its contents. "You'll understand when the time is right." And in that moment, Sabrina realized the accident hadn't been a random twist of fate. It had been the beginning of a choice, one she still didn't fully understand. The tension didn't explode all at once. It crept in. First, it was a letter, no return address, left in Henry's mailbox. Daniel opened it. Inside, there was only an old copy of a company contract, sections highlighted in red. At the bottom, handwritten, "You still owe me." Henry stayed silent for several long seconds. Sabrina watched his expression carefully. It wasn't fear, it was exhaustion. "He wants to provoke you," Daniel said. "He wants a response," Henry corrected. 2 days later, Henry's car was found with a shattered window. Nothing stolen, nothing taken, just vandalized. A message. Daniel was furious. "This isn't a conversation anymore. It's intimidation, not violence," Henry replied calmly. "It's escalation," Daniel shot back. Sabrina felt her heart race with every new development. She wasn't used to conflict like this, but one thing was clear. Robert didn't want money, he wanted control. A week later, Robert showed up in person. No warning, no hesitation. He stepped through the front door as if he had every right to be there. Sabrina was sitting in the living room with Henry when the doorbell rang. Daniel answered. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Robert was elegant, confident, composed, but there was something unsettling in his eyes. "Henry," he said, as if greeting an old friend. "Robert." The coldness between them was palpable. Sabrina remained seated, watching. "You could have avoided all this," Robert continued. "So could you," Henry replied. Robert glanced at Sabrina. "I assume this is the new influence in your life." Daniel stepped forward. "Don't involve her." Robert ignored him. "Young lady, do you know who he really is?" Sabrina held his gaze. "I know he made difficult choices." Robert let out a short laugh. "He almost destroyed my life." "You destroyed your own," Henry answered evenly. The silence that followed was heavy. Finally, Robert laid out his proposal. "Sign a public statement acknowledging shared responsibility. I'll withdraw any future legal action." Daniel tensed immediately. "That's blackmail. It's negotiation." Henry inhaled slowly. "I won't rewrite history to ease your conscience." Robert looked at Sabrina one last time. "Then be prepared for consequences." And he left. The door hadn't even fully closed before Daniel exploded. "This is getting out of control." "Not yet," Henry said calmly. "He's going to keep pushing." Sabrina felt something new rising inside her. Not fear, anger. "What can he actually do?" she asked. Henry answered honestly. "He can try to damage my name again. He can file a lawsuit. He can drag everything back into the public eye." "And you?" "I can fight." Daniel looked at his grandfather with frustration. "I should have handled this years ago." "You can't live protecting ghosts," Henry said gently. But that night, Daniel asked Sabrina to step outside. The air was cold. "You can walk away from this," he said. "You still think I'm here out of curiosity? I think you don't deserve to carry problems that aren't yours." She crossed her arms. "When I stayed in the rain next to your grandfather, that wasn't my problem either." He fell silent. She continued. "I don't run when things get complicated." Daniel stepped closer. "I don't want to lose you because of this." The words slipped out before he could stop them. The silence between them shifted, thicker, more fragile. She met his eyes steadily. "Then don't push me away." He exhaled. "I don't know how to do this without trying to protect." "Then learn." In the days that followed, online articles began appearing. Small pieces mentioning the old scandal, referencing moral responsibility, nothing illegal, but enough to stir speculation. Daniel was furious. "He's laying the groundwork." Henry seemed calmer than anyone. "I've faced worse." That's when Sabrina began to understand something she hadn't before. Henry wasn't afraid of losing money. He was afraid Daniel would inherit resentment. One evening, Henry called them both into the living room again. "I've made a decision." Daniel straightened immediately. "What decision?" "I'm going to address this publicly." "Grandpa, that could make things worse. Or it could end them." Henry turned to Sabrina. "I don't want you feeling responsible for any of this." She answered without hesitation. "I don't." He smiled softly. "That's what I admire most about you." Daniel watched the exchange and realized something unavoidable. She wasn't just present anymore. She belonged. But the next day, Henry received an unexpected phone call. He answered in the living room. Daniel and Sabrina watched in silence. Henry's expression changed, not fear, surprise. He ended the call slowly. "What is it?" Daniel asked. Henry looked at both of them. "Robert had a heart attack." Silence. "He's in the hospital." Sabrina felt the room tilt slightly. "Does that change anything?" Daniel asked. Henry answered with unexpected calm. "It changes everything." He stood. "I'm going to see him." Daniel stared at him in disbelief. "After everything?" "He's carrying too much weight to leave this world like that." Sabrina understood then. That meeting could redefine the entire story, and maybe reveal the last secret Henry had never told. The hospital felt smaller than it should have. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was the weight of everything left unsaid. Henry walked slowly down the white hallway, leaning on his cane, but with the steady posture of a man who had already made an important decision. Sabrina walked beside him. Daniel followed a few steps behind, restless. Robert was in a room at the end of the corridor. When they walked in, the contrast was brutal. The man who had stormed into Henry's house weeks earlier with arrogance now looked stripped down to something bare. No suit, no commanding posture, no control, just fragility. Robert looked at Henry. "I didn't think you'd come." Henry answered calmly, "I've never left things unfinished." The air thickened. Daniel remained near the door, alert. Robert's breathing was uneven. "I lost everything trying to prove you were wrong." Henry stepped closer. "You lost everything trying to prove I was you." The silence that followed wasn't hostile. It was tired. Robert closed his eyes for a moment. "I diverted contracts, manipulated reports. I needed to grow faster. And you tried to protect me." Daniel's eyes widened. Sabrina felt her heartbeat in her throat. Robert continued. "You took part of the blame so the employees wouldn't lose everything." Henry said nothing. Robert turned his face slightly. "I didn't want you remembered as the man who destroyed the company." Daniel finally spoke. "Then why make it look like he was guilty?" Robert's answer came with brutal honesty. "Because I couldn't stand watching you be better than me." The room felt smaller. Henry pulled his phone from his pocket. "Say that again." Robert did. Every word, every detail. Daniel recorded it too. Sabrina realized something in that moment. This wasn't revenge. It was release. When they stepped outside, a light rain had begun to fall. Henry looked lighter. Daniel walked beside him in silence. Sabrina felt like she was witnessing something rare, a man facing his own past without running from it. "I should have reported him sooner," Henry said suddenly. "You did what you believed was right," Sabrina replied. He looked at her gently. "And you? Do you always do what you believe is right?" She thought about the night of the accident, the decision to stay, the man in the dark suit. "I try." Henry smiled. "Keep trying." The recording was handed over to the lawyer. Within days, the narrative shifted. The articles hinting at guilt were replaced with headlines about assumed responsibility and late redemption. Daniel watched the news quietly. It wasn't just about reputation. It was about justice. He turned to Sabrina. "I spent years defending someone who never needed defending. He just needed to be heard," she said softly. Daniel was silent for a few seconds. "You do that with people." "Do what?" "You listen before you judge," she smiled faintly. "I learned that on a rainy night." Their eyes met, half a second longer than they should have. A few weeks later, Henry called them into the living room. Something felt different. He looked tired, but peaceful. "I settled the past. Now I need to organize the future." Daniel sat down. Sabrina hesitated, then sat too. Henry placed a folder on the table, the same one from before. "I revised my will after the accident." Sabrina's heart began to race. "Mr. Henry, let me finish." He opened the folder. "Daniel, you have always been my natural heir. That doesn't change." Daniel's shoulders relaxed slightly. "But inheriting money is not the same as inheriting purpose." Henry turned to Sabrina. "I've been watching you." The air grew heavier. "I watched you stay in the rain, stand up to strangers, remain even after threats." Her eyes filled with tears. "I didn't do anything extraordinary." "Yes, you did." He took a slow breath. "I created an educational foundation for young people who work, study, and don't have the opportunities they deserve." The world seemed to slow. "And you're going to run it." Sabrina felt the ground disappear beneath her. "Me? But you understand the value of opportunity." Daniel sat frozen. "Grandpa, you never mentioned this." "Because I needed to be certain of who she was." Sabrina tried to speak, but her voice faltered. "I don't want money," she managed. Henry smiled warmly. "That's exactly why you're the right person." He closed the folder. "Daniel will inherit the rebuilt businesses. You will inherit what I always meant to build." Silence. Long. Daniel finally stood. "I thought I'd feel jealous." Sabrina looked at him. "Do you?" He walked toward her. "No. I feel proud." Henry watched them quietly. Later in the garden, the sky darkened into early evening. Sabrina stood near the fence when Daniel approached. The air between them felt different now, lighter, honest. "I tried to push you away," he said. "I know. I thought protecting meant keeping distance." She looked up at him. "And now?" He stepped closer. "Now I know protecting means trusting." Her heart pounded. "I don't want someone to save me, Daniel. I don't want to save you." He gently held her face. "I want to walk beside you." The words lingered. Sabrina felt every difficult night, every decision, every fear align in that moment. "I almost lost you before I even knew you," he continued. "If that accident had gone differently." She placed her hand over his. "But it didn't." He smiled softly. "I fell in love with the way you stayed." Tears came without warning. not from sadness, from recognition. I fell in love with the way you try to be strong even when you're afraid. He rested his forehead against hers. I'm afraid now. Of what? Of not being enough. She smiled through her tears. You already are. The kiss wasn't impulsive. It was earned, slow, intentional, deep, filled with promise, with choice, with certainty. Months later, the library looked different. A new wing was being renovated with support from the Educational Foundation. Sabrina walked between freshly organized shelves. Young students filled out scholarship applications. Henry sat in a comfortable chair nearby, watching with quiet satisfaction. Daniel stood beside her, his hand intertwined with hers. Henry called out gently, "Do you still believe in second chances?" Sabrina smiled. "I believe in the choices we make after them." Daniel squeezed her hand. "And I believe some choices choose us." Outside, the rain began to fall again, but this time no one was standing alone in the street. The library lights remained on, and inside, 3 lives that had crossed by accident were now intertwined by choice.